This isn't too fancy for a wedding, is it?
Nothing is too fancy for a wedding, darling. Air out your grandmother's old lace. Wear full-size fairy wings if you want. And put on the good bra. Yeah, never know who you're going to meet. Weddings. They're so sexy. They know who you were when they invited you. Do you really think they're going to be surprised when your bully-cue shows up dressed like a coven of sexy gothic witches? If 3 people haven't asked you, oh, did you make that yourself? By the time they cut the cake, you will have failed. And if they don't like the outfit, well, who cares? I can't hear them out of one ear anyway.
Okay.
My polycule was invited to our friend Megan and Dave's wedding, and we've all decided to go in matching pinstripe and corset back outfits to the event.
Since no one had anything as cool as my design in plus size, that meant it was up to me to make my own. I have 2 weeks, a pulled jaw muscle, and a ruptured eardrum, but I'm gonna push on. And this week, I am going to start by working on the vest. I'm Emmy, and I'm so glad to have you here. This is Crafter of Many Kinds.
This week, I'm focusing on building the vest. Since my idea for making a 1/4 scale dress form went up in smoke, I'm having to work in full scale while doing some draping to get my pattern started. My plan for this vest is for it to have princess seams on both the back and front to give me the best tailored fit I can get. After that, I'll create the matching half-circular, high-low peplum to match the top. It will also have D-rings on the back for the corset, so it can be tightened to size as needed, given my frequent weight changes. The back of the vest will be designed with an open box pleat so that you won't be able to see through the vest to the shirt. I've decided to make this part red to match the lining and to give me a subtle splash of color up the back. It will be closed in the front with 3 buttons, and I've decided that the pockets will be on the sides of the peplum instead of the front, so I can rest my hands in them if I want to. I've decided to go with this pinstripe fabric designed by Studio 10 Design on Spoonflower. The pinstripes are actually little blood splatters, which I thought was a clever touch. It looks like pinstripes from a distance, but has a little surprise if you look closely. Just my sort of thing. I decided to go with Spoonflower's satin fabric and got 6 yards since I wasn't totally sure how much I would need. But hopefully this will be enough. While it's shipping out to me, I'm gonna work on the pattern in the meantime. The blouse that had fantastic sleeves arrived from a store called Restyle, but even their largest size was a couple of inches too small for me. So I'm gonna be taking out the darts on the front and the back so that it'll fit. Because I really want to keep the flounce on the shirt showing in the design, I'm gonna wear it with 1 button opened and make the top part of the vest follow under the line of the collar until the waist. As you can see, I marked off where I want the princess seams and the edges of the vest to be in comparison to the blouse. Now I'm gonna take my draping fabric and follow the lines that I've created and pin them together to try to get a nice, flat curve along my bust line and back. I randomly had this fabric in my cache. I think it was a donation, but it was the perfect color and thickness to use for my mock-up. Before my grandma moved away, I had a superpower that I called my elder charm, which is when an older person who's heard all about your crafting projects over card games and Sunday brunches randomly gifts you things that they think will be useful. I've gotten so much of my fabric hoard, notions, and wide array of random crafting supplies because someone's grandma saw something and just thought, I bet Emmy could use something like that. Most of the fabrics I used for my mock-ups came to me under just those circumstances. Not all fabrics are meant to be used to create amazing, intricate outfits. Sometimes they're just destined to be prototypes for something cooler. Once I've pinned and drawn these seam lines, I'll pull them off the mannequin and place them down on my grid paper, where I'll be refining the curves and matching the seam sizes by using my special rulers. This is called truing the pattern, which means to make sure that all of the matching pieces are the same length. Sewists use things called notches, which are cuts in the fabric that are used as balance points on the pieces. This way, you know your pieces are being sewn to the correct item and will fit properly because the notches will line up. This is really important with curvy spots, like on my large bust, because the larger, curvier piece can distort as it goes through the feet of the sewing machine. The notches will let me gauge how much of that is going on and allow me to adjust accordingly. I'm cutting the corrected pieces out of my tester fabric, and once I create my mock-up, I will check it on my mannequin and adjust any seam changes or size modifications that need to happen. I really wish I'd gotten to drape this on my smaller mannequin. While I think my strength lies in flat patterning, there is a kind of designer's rush when you're putting fabric on an actual form. Whenever you watch design shows, the designers are always making amazing things on their size 6 dress forms with all kinds of fancy fabric. But if I was ever on those shows, I would be the nerd in the back with her graph paper going, mathematically correct and replicatable technical design is the cornerstone of the fashion industry. Sadly, it is really not as interesting as watching people drape things. But if I ever manage to figure out how to make and sell patterns online, I will be switching professions lickety-split. I'm really happy with this mock-up. The only issue I saw was that the side seam needed to be moved forward by about 1 inch, but that's a really easy thing to correct. I'm using some elastic pinned at the back to represent the eventual waist size of the vest when the corset back is fully in. I also patterned and attached the peplum to make sure that the shape, fullness, and length were what I wanted, and I was really pleased with this right away. All in all, a pretty bang-on mock-up on the first go-around. Now I just need the fabric to show up so I can keep working. Yay!
This fabric is trash! Ah!
Now, this is partially my fault. When I chose satin, what I had in mind was that stuff that we made our prom dresses out of in the early 2000s. You know, the kind of fabric that would stand up by itself, you know, if you put it down. And that is not, it's just not what this is. This is the kind of fabric that you would use to make your 6-year-old child's princess costume for Halloween. And I would know because I went as a princess 4 times. This kind of fabric is meant to be used on something flowy and drapey and not anything like the structured garment that I have designed. The worst part is because it is a printed fabric, the flip side is white, which means anytime there's any kind of stress on the seams, which there's a lot of because this is just a floppy piece of fabric and I'm making a tailored vest out of it, you see white in the seams. I'm just gonna keep throwing the fabric away because it is trash. It's trash. It's trash. And I paid $19 a yard for said trash. Not enough time to get anything else. The best I can do is to try to stick an interfacing on the back of it to give it more structure. So that's what I'm gonna have to do.
Because I need to make sure that I get absolutely the most out of the fabric since I have a limited amount, I'm going to be opening the fabric up to cut it so that I can get more shapes out of the yardage. I really hate buying fabric online when you have no idea what you're getting because it's really just opening yourself up for disappointment. But at least 3 of the local fabric stores that I grew up with around here have closed in the last 10 years, so sometimes there just isn't any option. Obviously, there's a Joann's in the area, but they tend to be really expensive and mostly cater to quilting. There is one amazing store in our area, but from our new house, it is about an hour's drive both ways, so it's a bit of a hard sell unless I need something very specific. It's called Fabrics R Us, and it's a Vietnamese store, which is actually just a labyrinth of fabrics. They put giant rolls of fabric standing up on frames, and you just wander through. It's not a particularly big store, but they have shoved hundreds of fabric rolls into their tiny space, and it can range from anything from basic cotton to hand-embroidered sari silks. When you want to check out, you have to flag down one of the ladies that works there and walk her to each of the different fabrics that you want, at which point, that is when she informs you how much they are because the prices are not posted anywhere. So it really pays to be polite and regular sometimes. Then you tell her how much you want, she pulls it off the roll, cuts it, and then folds it and then hands it to you. And you have to be able to carry everything that you want because the aisles in the store are so small that you can't actually get carts into it. It sounds a bit chaotic, but you are guaranteed to get a great price and to find something that Joann's hasn't even dreamed up yet. Sadly, I fell into the disappointment hole of the online shopping on this project, and now I am paying for it. Because not only was the fabric not what I wanted, but neither was this interfacing. The vest now feels like paper, and it gives me cone boobs, not to mention that no amount of easing or ironing has flattened out these horrific wrinkles on my chest. If only I could just get some local woodland creatures to do me a Cinderella and fix this while I cry in a corner. The opening in the back is looking a little bigger than I wanted, but this mannequin at its smallest setting is just the tiniest bit bigger than I am. So I'm hoping that this part won't actually be as big when it's actually on me. I'm going to start drafting up the lining based on the pattern, and this time I'm going to remember that facings are a thing. So the first inch inside the garment will also be made out of the pinstripe fabric. The rest of the lining will be made out of red polyester. An update on my ear issues. I was completely deaf in my right ear for at least 3 days after the rupture. I was given antibiotic eardrops that needed to be put in twice a day for 2 weeks, but had to be administered while I was laying down, so I had to rope in both Paul and Jess to help me administer them. I had originally been given muscle relaxing pills after I pulled my jaw, and had been warned to take them at home to see how they affected me before I tried to use them while, say, driving or something. But just one tablet knocked me out so completely, it ended up giving me sleep paralysis. After that, they gave me intense painkillers, which did make the pain go away, by making me unconscious for 15 hours. Neither of these medications were helpful in the slightest, so I just decided that it was going to be good old ibuprofen helping me out. After 3 days of silence, there was suddenly a sound in my ear that reminded me of when your ears pop from the changing of the altitude. And I could hear just the tiniest bit for a second through kind of watery haze. It didn't last for very long, but over the next couple of days, the pops began to appear more frequently, and I was able to start hearing again as normal as I had before. Even though I could hear again, I was stuck with the horrible muscle pull on my neck, which got worse every time I started trying to work. As I was working on finishing up this part of the outfit, I really just wanted it to come out well so that it was worth how much effort I was putting to push through the pain. I just knew that I would be really disappointed in looking back at the pictures of this day if both Paul and Jess were wearing pinstripes and I was wearing something completely different. And that really motivated me to keep pushing and finish the thing I had started. Now, this lining with a modesty panel for the corset back was honestly a complete mystery on how I'd accomplish it when I came up with the idea. It took me days to figure out the best and most realistic way to accomplish it. I decided the best way to do it was to build a box pleat into the back of the vest, and this will make it so that if you pull back the edges of the back of the corset, the lining will have a small pocket area in the shape of a trapezoid, and it'll appear like there's another garment inside. The upper seams of the box pleat will be covered with a semicircular extra facing at the back of the neck that will cover up all of the raw bits. If this works, it'll honestly be one of the more clever things that I've designed. I didn't show so much of me sewing this portion of the vest together because all of the parts looked really similar and it was difficult for me to even know which part I was working on in the footage. But the whole of the lining came together just as planned, including the back box pleat. Now, to make the outside of the vest, the first thing I need to do is attach the D-rings that are going on the back to form the corset. I use my button spacer to properly space the rings and attach them using matching satin ribbon. The first time that I made a vest was for a LARPing buddy of mine for an early Victorian themed event. I was still pretty new to sewing and had no idea what I was doing, but I was able to get the front and back to look right. However, I had no idea how you were supposed to finish a lined vest, so I just gave up and I sewed the sides together with the raw edges on the inside, figuring no one was gonna see it and no one was gonna care. Despite the less than professional outcome of my costumes, that event was actually the catalyst to me deciding that sewing was what I wanted to do. I ended up making 4 ball gowns and 3 men's outfits. I realized once I finished those outfits that I still wanted more. I figured any crafts that I could do for 18 hours a day and not be bored of was the right craft for me. I run those through the machine ahead of attaching the lining so that I know that they won't shift while I'm working. Now, I thought about how best to attach the bottom of the vest to the top, and after a few trial and errors, I decided that the neatest version was to construct the peplum as its own independent piece first, and then attach that to the bottom of the vest. I tried a couple of different methods, and while I was doing that, I realized that the pattern for my peplum must have been slightly uneven because the pieces didn't entirely match each other and needed to be trimmed a little. I've already sewn in the pocket on the pinstripe side, so once I sew almost all the way around, I'll turn it inside out and press it. After that, I sewed it to the top of the vest using the stitch in the ditch method, which makes an invisible stitch on the outside of the garment, but secures the lining on the inside. And with that, I've completed the top of my look. I added a lace-topped slip to give the piece just a bit more modesty, as well as these cool red and gold buttons that I found at Joann's. I also laced up the corset back, which is a little bubblier than I was hoping for, but with how thin the fabric is, I think this is honestly the best I can hope for.
Now, I just need to finish the skirt and this outfit will be ready for a wedding. Next time, I'm going to be practicing walking in a mermaid skirt, making jewelry, and giving wedding toasts. Hopefully, that crappy fabric is not going to bite me in the butt as badly on the skirt as it did for the vest. I'm so glad to have you here. This is Crafter of Many Kinds.